Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us on this late Friday afternoon, and also to those who are following us on the live webcast. Sorry that the event got filled up quite quickly, and we had to close a bit early for those who've reached out to wonder how they can register. I'm Ibrahim, Senior Fellow here and the Director of the Africa Program. So before we get going, I'd like to go over some logistics. The first is that we are also on Twitter, so if you want to follow and join the conversation there, the hashtag is Securing Mali. Securing Mali. And for your convenience too, we're providing simultaneous translation in French and English as part of this program would also be in French. So if you don't have one of the devices and you do need one, make sure to get one. And for the questions part, we're going to do things a bit differently than we've done in the recent past. There are some question cards you must have received when you registered. So if you could write down your questions, fill it out, and then raise your hand, a staffer will come and collect those from you so that when we get to the question and answer part, they can use those cards to ask your questions. And then so it is really a distinct honor and a privilege to welcome to Brookings and to Washington His Excellency Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta, the President of the Republic of Mali. Your Excellency, on behalf of Brookings leadership, Your Excellency, on behalf of Brookings leadership, welcome. Soyez le bienvenu. Et dansez. Initagama. Iniche. I wasn't exactly expecting the translators to get this one right. It is in Bambara, the language commonly spoken in Mali and elsewhere in West Africa. And it simply means welcome and thank you. The Africa Growth Initiative program here was born really out of Brookings leadership's recognition of the importance of Africa's development and the need for a strong and independent voice on socio-economic issues of the continent. Since its inception 10 years ago, AGI, as it is called, with support from the Global Economy and Development Program that we are a part of, as well as from Brookings leadership, is fulfilling that mission by producing evidence-based research and recommendations to inform policies in Africa and toward Africa. AGI has also become a trusted partner and a neutral broker for policy discussions on opportunities and challenges of the continent. In connection with today's event, Brookings more broadly has been very attentive to the challenges faced by the so-called fragile countries around the world, including those in Africa and the Sahel region. In 2014, Brookings co-hosted with the state of Qatar the 11th annual US Islamic World Forum, during which President Keita provided some very well-received remarks, and that forum gave birth, among other achievements, to the Tombouctou Renaissance Initiative, which promotes peace and prosperity through culture in Mali, and is still active today with the support of His Excellency and the Malian authorities. So thank you, Mr. President, for your leadership on the issue. As I look at the situation in Mali today, I've become increasingly convinced that it is not a Malian problem alone. It is not a Sahel problem alone. It's not even an African problem alone. It is a global problem. Terrorism activities have become increasingly complex, sophisticated, and interconnected. In other words, it has also become a globalized activity. And the risk of spillovers across national borders and across continents have never been greater. And to adapt a quote from Martin Luther King, I firmly believe that fragility and instability anywhere in the world is a threat to security and stability everywhere. The global implications of the problem therefore require that we come together as a global community, step up our engagement to support the regional efforts, capitalize on the progress made so far, and to decisively win the battle in Mali and the Sahel, so we won't have to fight it in the United States, in Europe, in Asia, or elsewhere. In my view, a victory is not just defined as a military victory, as a victory that does not address the fundamental causes of fragility and insecurity will likely be short-lived. The complexity of the situation requires an interdisciplinary approach, the multifaceted solutions involving economic development, social and cultural interventions to win the minds and the hearts of the populations. This explains Brookings' keen interest in the nexus between security, economic development, and humanitarian issues. And I couldn't have thought of a better moderator for the conversation than Brookings' own president, John R. As you know, John is a retired US Marine Corps 4-star general and a former commander of NATO International Security Assistance Force and US forces in Afghanistan. Under his presidency, Brookings' work on fragility, security, and economic development nexus has received renewed impetus, and we look forward to sharing the results and recommendations from the work of our experts on this subject. As part of John's post-retirement diplomatic roles, he served as a special presidential envoy to the global coalition to counter ISIL, the insurgency in the Middle East. His experience is then very, very, very valuable for the conversation and for the quest for a solution both in the Sahel and globally. With this, I'll stop here, and please join me to welcome to the podium His Excellency, Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta.
First of all,
tout d'abord, j'aimerais vous remercier de votre présence ici aujourd'hui. Malheureusement, je ne parle pas couramment l'anglais, donc je vais parler en français.
Monsieur le Président de Brookings, distingués invités, Mesdames, Messieurs, je voudrais tout d'abord
I would like to, first of all, thank you.
le directoire de Brookings,
I'd like to thank the leadership of
ainsi
Brookings
que la
Institute,
communauté diplomatique
as well
africaine
as the African
Washington
diplomatic community in
les
Washington,
amis du
D.C.,
Mali
and the Friends of
pour
Mali
l'accueil chaleureux
for the very
qui
warm
nous a été réservé
welcome that you have
notre
shown us
arrivée
here
dans cette
today
belle ville.
when we have come,
Capitale
as we
des
came
États-Unis.
here to this beautiful city in the
Il me
United
plaît,
States.
en cette occasion solennelle,
It is a great pleasure for me
Je
to
veux
be
remercier
here
du
on
fond
this
du cœur
solemn occasion and to
pour la
thank you
marque
from the bottom of
délicatesse
my heart
qui a
for the
consisté à
wonderful
m'inviter
outpouring of
et à me
hospitality
recevoir dans
you have
ce
shown
bel
in
institut
inviting
temple du
me
savoir
to come here and
que
to
j'ai
speak with
nommé
you in this
Brookings.
wonderful temple of
Et
knowledge
aussitôt
that I call
répondu,
Brookings.
oui, car
And I was pleased to
tout
accept
ce
this
qui peut
invitation
faire en sorte que nous soyons
because
sous la lumière, que le momentum qui est le nôtre
this is
aujourd'hui
a
soit
point in
accompagné
time where we need to be
et favorable à la paix,
working
très
together to
favorable. Et nous
support
avons donc
peace,
devoir
and we have a
d'y
duty
souscrire avec plaisir.
to
Je suis ici.
work together and to collaborate,
L'opportunité
which
de
is why I'm
pouvoir
here today.
m'entretenir avec un auditoire aussi important.
The opportunity to be
En
able
vue
to
de
be
décliner
here
ma
with you
vision du
today
Sahel,
with this distinguished audience
avec
is
les
a
autres
wonderful
initiatives
opportunity for
en
me
cours
to be able to lay out my vision
pour
for the
faire face
Sahel
aux défis sécuritaires
in order to
et vous exposer les
promote
grandes
initiatives
orientations de
to
la politique
face our
de développement
security
du Mali.
challenges and to also explain
Et
the
chacun
main
sait
political
ici
orientations for my platform
le
to
Mali a traversé une
promote
crise
development in Mali.
multiforme.
As you know, Mali is
Et je
facing
sais
many
que
crises,
chacun de vous
and I
présents
know
ici
that
aimerait
everyone
savoir
here today
ce que nous avons entrepris
would
au Mali
like to
depuis
know what we have been doing in
assurer la
Mali
paix,
in order to
la
ensure
sécurité
that there is peace,
et le développement,
security, and development,
car le lien est
because
absolument
this is a crucial
évident
nexus.
entre les deux.
There is a crucial link
Cette
between the
rencontre
two.
aujourd'hui,
Today's meeting is
est
also
opportune.
a very timely meeting
en ce sens
because
qu'elle s'inscrit dans
This
une dynamique
is part of an
multi-tracking
effort to an overall
Nécessaire
effort
pour
to
renforcer
promote
l'image
a
du Mali
multi-track
en
diplomacy
mettant en exergue
that is
les
necessary
progrès
for us
et les
to
opportunités
strengthen the image of
d'investissement.
Mali and to showcase the
Comment
progress that
est-il
Mali
étonné
has made, as well as its
La
investment
disponibilité du
opportunities.
Brookings Institute
It comes as no
coopérer
surprise
avec le
that
gouvernement du Mali
Brookings Institute has been
si l'on
so
connaît son apport
available and
inestimable dans la
and ready
promotion
to
du riche
cooperate with the
héritage
government of
culturel
Mali,
de
and
notre
that has
pays à
provided
travers
invaluable
l'initiative
support in promoting its
Timbuktu
rich
Renaissance.
cultural
À cet
heritage
égard,
through
je
the
voudrais vous
Timbuktu
remercier
Renaissance
chaleureusement.
Initiative. And for this, I thank you
Ça a été rappelé
sincerely.
ici, nous fûmes de la rencontre au cours de laquelle cette initiative a été lancée.
This is an
Et nous avons eu
initiative that
plaisir
was
par la suite à recevoir la
recently
délégation du
launched,
Brookings Institute à Bamako.
and we were pleased to
revenir
receive
au
representatives from
sujet du
Brookings
jour.
in Bamako. But to come
dois
back
vous
to the
rappeler
topic
que
of
le
the day,
Sahel
I
est
would
cette
like
vaste
to
étendue
remind you that the Sahel is
s'étend
a
de
vast
l'Atlantique
region
à la mer
that
Rouge.
stretches from the Atlantic to the Red Sea.
Disons l'Atlantique jusqu'au baril
From the
d'Azal.
Atlantic, as I
Et
said,
classé
to the Red Sea,
aujourd'hui
and it is
parmi les régions
also
les plus fragiles
now
au monde.
considered to be one of the most fragile
effet,
regions in the world.
Cette zone fait
Indeed,
aujourd'hui face
this region
à des crises
is now
aussi bien
facing
climatiques,
crises that are not only
environnementales,
climatic
économiques
crises, environmental,
sécuritaires.
economic, and security
Et
crises.
pourtant,
And yet,
cette région n'a pas
this
toujours
region
été ainsi.
has not always had such
L'histoire nous
challenges.
enseigne
History shows
que dès
us
les 11e
that
et
even
12e
as far
siècles,
back as the 11th and 12th
une
centuries,
intense vie fondée sur
this
des échanges
region was teeming with
entre l'Afrique
rich
du Nord
life based
et
on
le littoral
exchanges
ouest-africain
between North Africa and
y
the
était
West
menée.
African coast.
Et référence des ouvrages tels que
And we see this in
Golden Trail of
references of
de
many
Bourvil
works that have been written
choses de mémoire pour tous les
talking
économistes.
about the history
et
of
tous ceux qui
this,
s'intéressent
and also
échanges
works by
internationaux
economists.
Moyen Âge.
And we've seen these types of exchanges
empires
since
et
the
des royaumes
since the
puissants,
Middle Ages.
Songhai,
Powerful empires and
Kanem-Borno,
kingdoms, Songhai,
Mosi,
Kanem-Borno, Mosi,
Bambara,
Bambara,
s'y sont
have
développés.
all developed in this region.
Aujourd'hui, l'accroissement
Today,
important de sa
with
population
significant
pose
population
de
growth,
défis,
we are seeing formidable
notamment en
challenges.
matière
These
d'insuffisance
challenges are
alimentaire.
not only in the area
La
of food
vie est fortement
self-sufficiency,
tendue par l'évolution
but
climatique.
human life is also highly affected
Chez
by the
nous, le
ever-changing
changement
climate.
climatique est une réalité
And
que nous
climate
vivons
change
charnellement et quotidiennement.
is a daily challenge for us in our region.
Vous devinerez donc que dans
So
un
I'm
contexte
sure you
global
can,
du
as you can
changement
imagine,
climatique,
in a
cette zone
global
déjà fragile
context of climate change, this
pâtisse encore
zone, which is
davantage
already quite fragile,
des conséquences
is
négatives
suffering
de cette
significantly
cette
from the
tendance
impacts
à l'évolution
and the negative effects
vers la
of climate
détérioration.
change.
Cependant, la
However,
crise qui menace la survie dans
the
cette zone,
crisis that most
du Sahel,
threatens survival
de mon
in
point
this
de vue,
zone of the Sahel, from my point of view,
la crise sécuritaire,
is the security
est certainement la
crisis.
plus importante encore.
I believe that this is the
Comme vous le
most
savez,
pressing challenge we
mon
face.
pays, le Mali,
As you know, my country,
à
Mali,
l'instar des autres pays de la
like
région,
many other countries in the
fait
region,
face à une menace
is
terroriste
facing a formidable challenge
redoutable.
in
Imaginez
terrorism.
que les soi-disant musulmans
Imagine
venus
that
d'ailleurs,
so-called Muslims coming from other places,
venus d'ailleurs,
coming from outside of our
prétendent
country
nous enseigner l'islam
to supposedly
quand
teach
on
us
sait que
Islam,
Tombouctou
when we all know
a
that
été berceau
Timbuktu
d'utilisation
was the
islamiste
birthplace
depuis le Xe
of
siècle.
Islamic cultural. Since the 10th century.
Sankoré,
And
sont
Sankere,
connus dans tout le
all
monde
these
musulman.
different cultures were
Qui
present,
n'a pas
and they were
d'ailleurs
all
connu
part of the
le rôle
Islamic faith.
important de cette ville
So
prestigieuse
everybody is aware
promotion
of
de
the
la culture
very
islamique.
important role that this region
Donc, ce
played in the
contexte est
promotion of
par
Islamic culture.
Depuis 2012,
Since
le
2012,
Mali est confronté
Mali has also been facing
à cette
a
crise sécuritaire.
significant security
Dès
crisis.
l'entame de mon premier mandat,
Since I started
comme président
my
de la
first
République du Mali,
term as President of the
mon
Republic,
gouvernement a
my
œuvré
government has worked
inlassablement
tirelessly
pour lutter
to
contre ce phénomène
combat this
dangereux.
dangerous phenomenon.
Avec les autres États de la région,
Working with other states in the
notamment
region, in particular
Burkina
Burkina Faso,
la Mauritanie,
Mauritania,
le Niger, et le
Niger,
Tchad.
and Chad,
Mais nous avons vite
we
compris
came together and we
qu'aucun de
quickly
nos pays
understood that
séparément
none of our countries
pourrait
working
arriver
alone
au bout de
could
ce
face
fléau.
this challenge and
Il nous fallait
overcome
donc
it. We
faire en
realized
sorte
that we had
de
to
mettre nos
bring our
moyens
pool our
ensemble
efforts, work
dans
together,
un système organisé
and we did this
D'où la création
through
du G-5 Sahel
an organized system
North
in the
Shore
creation of the G-5
en
Sahel.
2015.
This was in
Depuis,
2015.
nous avons fait du chemin. Nous en sommes
And we have made a
aujourd'hui
lot of progress since then.
à une
Today,
force conjointe
we have now
que
a
nous avons mise en place
G5 Sahel
aux 5
joint
États.
force, which has been set up in the
Et
5 states.
nous avons compris aussi
We also understood
que la force conjointe ne pourrait avoir
that the joint
comme
force
seul projet, objectif,
could not
que la
have
défense,
simply a defense
dans cette
objective.
crise du Sahel,
In the crisis in the
le
Sahel,
terrorisme a prospéré aussi en
we
raison
have, the
de la
terrorists have
précarité
also been
des
able
conditions
to
de vie des
prosper
gens.
because of the other
donc,
conditions in the
le
Sahel.
développement est un élément
So
essentiel,
development is
fondamental.
an essential,
Le lien
fundamental
donc,
issue.
la
There
liaison
is
donc
a very
entre la
crucial link
défense
between
et le
defense
développement
and development.
nous a conduit à mutualiser
And so we have again
nos
worked
moyens,
together,
nos
pooled our
moyens,
efforts and our
et
resources,
aussi avec les partenaires
and working with our
qui
partners as
depuis
well,
ont compris la pertinence
who
du
has
projet.
also understood
On
the
saisit la
impact of
pertinence
the
et
potential impact of
l'opportunité de
this
ce concept-là.
project, and they've seen
Nous
how
avons également
powerful
lancé
this initiative
l'Alliance
can
pour le
be.
Sahel,
They have worked with
dont
us
l'objectif
to
cette fois-ci est
create
le développement
this
économique
Sahel Joint
régional bien
Force
compris.
and to help us to promote our development
Ainsi,
and security
La force
initiatives.
conjointe du Sahel, du G-5 Sahel,
So the G5
est
Sahel Joint
l'illustration
Force
parfaite
is a perfect
de notre
example
engagement commun
of our common commitment
à faire face aux défis
to face
sécuritaires
the security
et
challenges
aux enjeux de
and
développement.
to tackle development issues
C'est
in the
le lieu
Sahel.
de saluer la communauté
In this, I
internationale,
also salute
pour
the
son
international
soutien,
community
notamment
for its support,
les États-Unis
in
d'Amérique,
particular the United States, for the support that they have
l'initiative
provided
de soutien au G5
to
Sahel
promote the G5
et
Sahel
le financement
initiatives
qu'ils ont déjà
and the funding that has already
de ce
been
pays-là,
provided from the United
60 millions
States
de dollars.
in
Le
the
Mali
amount of
apprécie
$60
le choix
million.
américain de contribuer de manière bilatérale
Mali very much
à la mise en place
appreciates
de la
the
force du
American
G5 Sahel.
decision to provide bilateral
Toutefois,
support for the implementation of the
notre
G5
conviction
Sahel force.
est que cette guerre
However, I am convinced
contre le terrorisme
that this war on terror
est un fléau mondial.
is a phenomenon that plagues
l'humanité
the
tout
entire
entière,
world
j'avais
and
dit.
threatens all of humanity.
Autant il doit être combattu au Moyen-Orient,
It
ou
has
en
to be
Europe,
waged in the Middle
autant
East,
il doit l'être au
in
Sahel.
Europe, as well as in the Sahel.
C'est pourquoi
This is why
j'estime que la
I
solidarité
believe that
internationale
international
doit y
solidarity
être accentuée
must be
si l'on veut éradiquer le
solidified
phénomène.
if we want to eradicate this phenomenon.
J'ai l'habitude de donner une image.
I often
dit que nous sommes
talk
comme
about this
une
in the
digue.
following terms. It's like it's a dike,
Une digue
like a dam
de protection.
that protects us
Les
and
efforts
holds back the
conjugués
waters.
de
If we work
la communauté
together
internationale,
with the international
de tous les pays
community,
qui
if
ont
all
les mêmes systèmes de
countries who
valeurs,
have the same who
donc qui
share the
croient
same
à
values
l'importance de l'homme
and who,
et de la vie de l'homme,
who
la vie
believe
humaine,
in the importance of
ces
human
pays
life,
ont réussi pratiquement à bouter
these
Daesh
countries
hors
have been
du Proche-Orient,
can all
mais le
work
reflux
together
s'est fait
to
vers
fight
où?
this
Vers
phenomenon.
nos zones à nous,
But we see that
et
now this is coming
singulièrement
into our zone,
vers le ventre mou, la Libye.
and it's also coming from areas such as Libya.
C'est pourquoi
This is why
le renforcement des
it is
capacités
important
opérationnelles
to strengthen
techniques
initiatives such
surtout
as
financières
operational and
des initiatives
technical
régionales,
capacity building, as well as
particulièrement le G5
financial
Sahel et
capacities
sa force conjointe,
and initiatives
doivent
on the
être
regional level,
davantage soutenus
and these must be
par la
supported
communauté
even more, even
Car
more
nous
so by
sommes
the
en mission
international
pas de nous,
community,
mais de l'ensemble du monde.
because this is something
Et ce
that is
monde-là
that affects the entire world, and
que ce
the entire
verrou
world must
ne doit pas
understand that this cannot
La
be allowed to
disponibilité d'un
continue and to
financement pérenne
overflow
et
into other
prévisible,
areas.
y compris
The
travers
available
les Nations
of
Unies,
sustainable and
reste la
predictable
condition
funding,
sine
including
qua
through the
non
United Nations, is
pour
an
assurer la réussite de
indispensable
l'opération.
condition to ensure that this fight is
Imaginez un
successful.
peu que nous lancions la force conjointe dans les opérations
When we are
et que
looking
nous
at the
sommes obligés
operations
d'arrêter
that we are starting to
pour
initiate,
des
and if we have
difficultés,
to
pour défaut de
stop them
financement.
because we have a
Cela
lack of
serait une
funding,
catastrophe absolue.
that would be an absolute
qu'à Dieu ne
catastrophe.
plaise. Président Allen,
And
distingués invités, chers
so,
amis,
Mr. Allen,
nous
distinguished
sommes
ladies
des
and
peuples épris de
gentlemen,
liberté et de paix.
in Mali, we are a people who love
Et nous
peace
partageons
and
avec le
justice.
peuple américain
And with the American
les
people, we
mêmes
share
valeurs
the same
démocratiques
values of
et de respect de la
democracy
dignité humaine.
and respect for human dignity.
C'est pourquoi
This is
le
why
Mali reste
Mali
profondément attaché
places so much
aux
importance
questions relatives aux
on
droits de
issues
l'homme,
related to human rights
aux droits humains et à la bonne
and good
gouvernance.
governance.
L'exercice démocratique
The
est un
exercise
exercice de
in
longue haleine.
democracy is a
Et
long-term
souvent, nos
effort,
progrès ne sont pas
and often
suffisamment mis en
our
exergue
progress has not
au
been
regard des
sufficiently
injustices et
highlighted
des enjeux du
in the
moment.
face of the challenges
La
of
réussite
the
de
day and the
l'élection présidentielle au Mali,
uncertainties.
qui a permis au peuple
The,
malien de renouveler sa confiance en notre personne,
Presidential elections
est
in
la
Mali,
preuve
which
éloquente
allowed the
de
Malian
l'ancrage
people to
démocratique
renew
du
their
Mali.
vote of confidence in me,
Nous avons
is
tenu, en
solid
effet,
proof that democracy is becoming
en dépit du
firmly
contexte
rooted
que
in
nous
Mali.
vivons,
In the context
faire
in
en
which
sorte
we are
que
living,
l'échéance
we
soit tenue,
must make sure that
que
we
l'élection
continue our
présidentielle du Mali se
efforts,
tienne à terme échu.
that we must
Pour beaucoup, c'était une
carry out
gageure.
this work until
On
the
l'a dit
end.
impossible.
Some might say that
Cela
this
ne
is
pourra pas se faire.
impossible,
Les conditions de sécurité ne sont pas
but
réunies.
and some say
Le
that we don't
Nord
have the
n'est pas
proper
totalement
security
stabilisé.
conditions or that the
Le
area is
centre
not
a commencé de
stable.
bouger.
But things are
Il y a
starting to move, and
Des dissensions interethniques.
there
Donc,
may be
l'élection présidentielle
interethnic
au Mali ne saurait
tensions,
se tenir.
but Mali will
Nous
persevere.
avons compris, nous,
We have
qu'il y avait là
understood
un enjeu fondamental
that there
de
are
crédit pour notre pays, pas
important
seulement
issues that are at stake
pour
here
l'ensemble
not just for
situations qui
us,
ressemblent à la
but
nôtre.
for all the different
Pourquoi?
situations we are facing.
Nous avons dès l'abord
We
fait en sorte
must ensure
d'avoir un processus
that
le plus
we,
transparent
first of all,
possible,
have a very
le plus
transparent
inclusif possible.
process, that it is as
Et
transparent and as inclusive as
Nous avons
possible.
donc mis en place
So
un
we have
système
therefore set up a
de
system
révision exceptionnelle
for
des
what we
listes
call
électorales.
exceptional
Car
review
souvent en
of
Afrique,
our voter list. Because
ça
often in
aussi,
Africa,
l'expérience, nous l'avons
this
connu.
is also an experience we've seen many times in
Les
Africa,
disputes se font autour de
where
la liste des
there
fichiers
has
électoraux.
been issues or
Il est pas
problems
fi- il est
with
pas
voter
fiable.
registration
Il est
lists,
ceci,
they're
il est
not
cela.
reliable,
Donc,
and various other
fichier
problems that plague the
électoral
elections.
malien
So the Malian
a
voter
été
lists
exceptionnellement
have
révisé.
been were reviewed,
Cela ne nous a pas suffi.
but this
Nous
we
sommes
did
allés
not
au-delà.
stop there. We went even
Nous
further.
avons pensé, nous avons
We
estimé
felt
que ce fichier
that the voter
révisé
list, the
devait
revised
être
voter
audité
list,
par une autorité
should also be
morale
reviewed by a moral
reconnue.
authority, a recognized moral
L'Organisation internationale de
authority.
la francophonie, l'OIF,
So the OIF, the International
nous a
Organization of
assisté de son
Francophonie,
expertise.
lent
Le
us
fichier
their
a été réputé
expertise
fiable,
and sent us
fiable.
experts to review our list to ensure that
Ce
they were
comité
reliable
d'experts
and
maliens
accurate, working with Malian experts
l'a attesté
who also
était
attested to
présidé
the reliability
par le chef de
of
file de
these
l'opposition
lists. And it was
pour
even
la fiabilité.
approved by the head of the
Donc nous avons
opposition.
pensé que nous pouvions aller aux élections
So we felt that
dans des conditions
we went into our
apaisées,
elections in a
transparentes,
transparent,
conviviales,
peaceful
même
situation,
communales.
even a very communal and
Là, à 2 pas
atmosphere.
d'élection, il y a eu d'autres
And
exigences
after our
auxquelles,
elections,
encore une fois,
we have
nous
other
avons sacrifié.
priorities as well that we
À
are
la
continuing
veille
to focus
de la
on.
tenue de l'élection présidentielle,
Just before the presidential elections were
à
held,
quelques heures de l'ouverture des bureaux,
a few hours before the
nous avons
polling
été
stations were opened,
entrepris
we
par
undertook,
une mission de l'Union africaine
working through an African
dirigée par
Union
l'ancien
mission
président du Bénin, le président Boniaï,
led by the former
au
president
fin
of
que
Benin.
nous acceptions que les règles du jeu
We
soient revues.
undertook a mission to make sure
Nous avons
that
dit,
everything
cela n'est
was
pas
reviewed,
normal.
and
Il est admis que
we ensured that
quand un jeu se joue, on laisse se dérouler, on
that
n'en change
when
pas les
the
règles. Pour
elections
autant,
took place, that there would
Pour
not be
autant,
any fraud. However,
cette demande qui consistait à
this
accepter
request to accept
que les assesseurs du camp de l'opposition
people from the
puissent
opposition
être
party
renouvelés, nous
to be
l'avons
able
accepté.
to have their registrations
Alors que la
renewed,
loi
we
dit,
also agreed to this,
La
allowed
Cour
this,
constitutionnelle du Mali est très
even
précise
though
là-dessus. Les
this is
assesseurs
not
doivent être
necessarily something
nommés
that we have.
15 jours avant le scrutin.
Their advisors
Et il
had to
avait
be
été convenu
re-registered. We're supposed to have been
que
re-registered
chacune des
15 days
parties
before, 2 weeks before, but we still allowed this even up
aurait
until the elections.
dans chacun des bureaux
And in all of the different
un assesseur,
polling places,
un assesseur
we
pour
had
l'opposition, un assesseur pour
an
la
observer
majorité.
for the majority party
Mais
and an
entre les deux tours,
electoral observer for the
Le
minority
remembrement
party.
s'est fait en sorte que le challenger
When
a
the
estimé
elections were
que
held, the challenger
la nouvelle physionomie
felt
ne lui serait pas favorable,
that this
que
new
beaucoup de ceux qui étaient
composition was
avec lui
perhaps not favorable,
sont en train ou de venir vers
And
le candidat de la majorité que nous sommes, ou en tout cas
felt that
ne sont pas prêts à donner des
perhaps
conseils de vote.
that
Dès
perhaps
lors,
there had been some
leur
bias towards the
fiabilité
majority party,
posait problème.
and so we
En dépit
dealt
de
with
la
this problem right away,
délicatesse de la question, nous l'avons accepté.
and we agreed to
Tout cela
all these
pour
requests,
fonder
and
en
all this
crédibilité
to ensure
le scrutin
that
malien.
our Malian
cela était
elections
important.
were entirely credible,
monde
because this
entier
was
suivait
important. The
les
entire
élections
world was watching our
Le monde
elections.
entier était inquiet.
The entire world was
Nous
concerned.
avions une lourde responsabilité.
We had a very heavy
Car depuis le début de la
responsibility,
crise malienne,
because since the start of the Malian
la communauté
crisis,
internationale s'est mobilisée
the
massivement autour du Mali.
international community has mobilized on a
Donc, le
massive
Mali
scale
a
to
un
help
devoir
Mali. So Mali has a duty,
de redevabilité
a duty to be
en
accountable
faisant aussi bien que possible,
and to do everything we
autant
possibly
qu'il
can,
nous sera possible de faire,
to do
de
everything within our
qui
power
crédibilise
to have
son
credible
scrutin.
elections,
Pourquoi nous l'avons fait?
which is what we did.
Donc, au sortir de cette élection-là,
So following these
nous
elections,
avons eu le bonheur
we were very
que
pleased
l'ensemble
to see that overall,
de ceux qui étaient venus pour observer l'élection
out of all those who'd come
Au
to
plan
observe
international comme au
the
plan
elections,
national,
both national
ont
electoral
estimé le
observers and
scrutin
international
fiable,
observers,
transparent et
deemed
crédible.
these elections
C'est
to be
notre honneur
fair
qui est en
and
jeu.
credible.
Nous
So
l'avons
this
fait
is
pour
what
complaire
we
à
were
personne.
working to achieve.
Nous l'avons
There-
fait pour notre honneur,
We did this
pour notre
as a
dignité.
matter of honor, a matter of dignity.
Donc, Nous avons depuis un nouveau gouvernement,
So since the new government
et vous le savez qu'au sortir de l'élection
has
présidentielle,
begun,
nous avons
and
décidé
after the presidential elections,
de placer ce nouveau mandat
I have decided to
sous le signe
task the new
de
government
la confiance en la jeunesse.
and with
La confiance en
priorities,
la
and to
jeunesse.
also show the trust that we
La
have
confiance
in
en
our
la jeunesse
youth.
n'est pas
When I talk about
un
trust in
propos
our youth,
électoraliste.
this
L'élection
is
est
not
terminée.
something that we just
Mais un
throw out as
propos
a
de
matter of
conviction
course, but
profonde.
this comes from a
Et
very
simplement de
deep-seated
réalisme.
conviction, and also based on
Dans nos
realism.
pays, singulièrement au Mali,
In our countries, and particularly in
la
Mali,
majorité de la
the
population,
majority of the
60%
population,
est jeune,
60% of the population is
souvent très
young,
jeune.
very young.
L'avenir,
The
c'est
future
leur affaire.
is in the hands of our young people.
Le monde qui s'est construit, c'est eux.
The world
Donc,
is
il faut
theirs,
qu'ils soient dans la
so
décision.
they have to be part of the
Il faut que nous les
decision-making
préparions à la
process.
décision.
We have to prepare
Il
them
faut
to
que
be
nous les
part of the
incluions
decision-making
dans le
process.
processus
They must be
décisionnel
included in
qu'ils viennent aux
decision-making
affaires.
so that they can also
Et
help govern our
c'est
country.
certainement ce qui
And,
a valu à Madame le ministre des Affaires étrangères,
and that is what the
d'être
Ministry of Foreign
désignée.
Affairs has been working on.
pas parce qu'elle est femme,
And not because she's a woman.
Pas
She was
parce que nous voulons
designated,
faire un
I
effet,
chose her, appointed her to
mais
be
parce que
Minister
nous
of Foreign
la
Affairs,
savons
not because
compétente
she's a woman, but because
et
we know
que
she's
nous avons
competent.
confiance en la jeunesse.
And we have a lot of confidence in
pourquoi
our
elle a
youth.
compris.
So that's why she was chosen to hold this position.
Et dans ce nouveau gouvernement,
And in this new
nous
government,
avons aussi tenu
we also
à respecter notre parole et nos
wanted
engagements.
to keep our word and fulfill our commitments,
Nous avons toujours
keep
été
our promises,
impressionnés
because we've always been
par
very impressed
cette question
and
de la
very
promotion du genre.
of this,
Pour nous,
very interested in the issue of promoting
ce n'est
gender
pas une
equality.
question de
For us,
cadeau
it's not a gift that we're
aux
giving.
femmes
We're not giving a
que
gift
de
to
leur rendre
women.
justice. J'ai toujours
It's
le
a
mot
matter
de
of
Marguerite
justice.
Yourcenar de quand elle entrait
And-
à l'Académie française et je suis pas Jean
And
d'Ormesson.
when we worked,
Madame, ce n'est pas en
and
raison de votre sexe que nous
we
recevons
have
ici
been
aujourd'hui.
working on these issues.
Il ne suffit toujours pas
And
d'être
it's
femme pour
not
être reçue sous la
just,
coupole,
it's not simply a matter of
madame,
appointing women to some
plus au ciel
positions,
que tous les hommes qui ont
but
été
we are
reçus
trying
ici.
to also make sure
Eussent
that
tous,
women
madame,
have the
l'immense
same
talent qui est le
opportunities, and that we
Voilà
recognize
pourquoi
the
nous
immense
choisissons
talent that they have.
le
That's
talent,
why they're
la
there,
confiance, pas le genre.
because of their talent, not because
Et
of their
si, ce
gender.
faisant, nous rendons justice au genre également, tant
And
mieux.
if we do this, and if we are able to have more women in the government,
Donc,
then so much the
actuellement,
better.
Nous avons 34%. Je n'aime pas
Right
beaucoup
now,
ça.
we
Nous
have
avons 34% de
34%
femmes
women in
dans
the
le gouvernement
government, and
du
I'm
Mali.
not really happy with that percentage, but
Et nous avons
that's the
5
current
axes
percentage.
prioritaires.
And we also have 5
La gouvernance
main
et les réformes
priorities
institutionnelles
for our
et politiques.
government.
La promotion d'une
We
croissance
are working,
inclusive
first of all, to promote better
développement
governance
du
and
capital
political
humain
and institutional
et
reforms,
l'inclusion
to
sociale.
promote inclusive
L'environnement,
growth, to
j'ai
promote
dit
the development of
dans-
human
en entrant
capital
dans mon
and
propos,
social
son
inclusion.
importance pour un pays comme le Mali.
And this is also
Où l'on
important
voit,
for a country like Mali,
Très clairement,
where we can see
de
very
manière
clearly
macroscopique, quotidiennement,
on a
comment
daily
le désert
basis
avance. Comment
how
le
much
lit
we are
du fleuve,
progressing, but
d'année
how
en année,
and
a
we are looking
été
also to promote
comblé
environmental
par les dépôts
progress
éoliens.
to deal with climate
Ça,
change,
dans le
because
lit du
we're
fleuve.
seeing how our riverbeds
point
are drying up.
qu'aujourd'hui,
We're seeing climate
la
effects on our
navigation, ces
country
navigateurs
every
sur le
day.
fleuve Niger,
We're seeing effects on the
navigateurs
Niger
traditionnels, très
River.
habiles. Il faut toute leur
And we
science
must look at all the
pour slalomer
science. We
maintenant à
must
travers
use this to
de véritables dunes
to
déposées dans le lit
see,
du fleuve Niger.
because often it's very difficult
Et
to
je
even
dis
navigate
aussi
this river because of the sand dunes that
si
have
nous ne
been
prenions garde,
increasing. So
ce
if we
fleuve
do
Niger,
not
qui pour
take
nous est une
more
bénédiction des
steps to
dieux,
prevent these
risque
impacts,
d'être un souvenir, triste souvenir.
then the
Si
Niger
le
River
fleuve n'est
is
pas
simply
entretenu.
going to become a memory
Et
at
s'il
some
continue
point.
d'être
And
agressé
if it
par
continues to be
l'homme et par la
impacted
nature,
by nature
car
and
il y a
by
l'effet
climate
éolien,
effects,
il y a l'avancée
because
du
there's
désert,
also the
il
effects
y a
of
aussi
wind
l'orpaillage
deposits,
sauvage
and
qui fait que
and other
on déverse dans le lit du fleuve
climate
du mercure, du
impacts,
cyanure,
and if we see all the
à la
different
recherche de l'or,
impacts, we see
et
that
ce
there's
faisant, on tue la faune
mining,
aquatique.
mercury, or gold, and
On
other
tue,
mining
toute vie
activities, but this is all
long du
things
fleuve,
that need to be
et cela, à
taken
terme,
into
peut
account,
condamner le
these
fleuve
activities
Niger
along
à
the,
devenir
that
une plaie.
are conducted
Donc,
along the Nile River,
l'environnement
and we need to protect our river so
le
that we'll
changement
be there in the
climatique
future.
et le développement durable.
So we're promoting
sont également
sustainable
nos soucis.
development and
Enfin, une
a
diplomatie et une
sustainable
coopération
response to
internationale
climate change.
pour que
Finally, we're
nous
focusing our
développions des actes de
efforts
solidarité
on
à l'endroit de
diplomacy,
notre peuple, mais
international
également
cooperation,
aussi
and partnership
que nous restions partie
to
prenante
ensure
à
that
la
we
lutte des
are
peuples
stakeholders
pour le maintien des valeurs
in
qui font
promoting
l'humanité
the aspirations
et à
of our
lesquelles nous
people and
croyons.
also promoting the rights
C'est pour
of
tout cela,
humanity
chers
that
amis,
we hold
aujourd'hui,
so dear.
Nos efforts ont permis
Our efforts have enabled us
de sortir le Mali d'une
to
situation de
bring
non-croissance,
Mali from a situation
0,5% quand nous arrivions, moins
of almost
0,5%,
no growth or even
aujourd'hui
minus
5%.
0.5% growth to now
C'est
a
peu encore,
situation where we have an
mais
annual
nous
growth
avons
rate of
poursuivi
5%. So we have
Et
made
nous
a
avons
lot of
été très
progress,
heureux
and we've been
de
very
constater
pleased
que
to
dans
note
notre zone
that in our zone,
économique,
in the West African Economic
l'UEMOA
Monetary
comme la
Union,
CEDEAO,
WAMU, and
à
ECOWAS
l'UEMOA,
zone,
sur les 8 États,
out of the
nous
8
avons
member
aujourd'hui la troisième
states,
place
we are
en termes
the
économiques constants.
third largest
Et
economy
nous
in our
satisfaisons à
economic
tous les critères
region.
de convergence. La CEDEAO,
And within
pour les critères
ECOWAS,
de convergence de premier rang,
we
nous
are
sommes
working
également
in this area as well.
dans les rangs.
And we are a
Un bon
major
classement.
actor. We have been well ranked
L'encours de la dette
among the countries
est
in terms of our
absolument
debt rating.
Remarquable.
We've
Nous
made
avons une
significant
capacité
progress there.
d'endettement
We have a debt
qui est
capacity
loin encore d'être
that
épuisée.
is still far from being
Nous en sommes à
exhausted,
30%,
about
alors que
30%,
la
whereas
CEDEAO
ECOWAS
nous autorise jusqu'à les 70%.
authorizes us to have almost up to
Ça veut dire que le Mali
70% debt
a encore
capacity. So this shows
de
you that
l'espoir dans
Mali
ce domaine-là et
is
nous avons de
still has a
l'ambition
lot of
également.
hope in this and a lot of ambition in this
Nous
area.
avons songé aussi
We have also been
aux
focusing
conditions de vie de nos populations,
on the living conditions
ce
of
qui
our
fait que les transferts
population,
sociaux
looking at our social
ont connu
needs. And
un bond
we have seen
d'environ
that
200 millions
we
d'euros.
received a grant of almost a jump in almost
Nous
200
songeons
million
également
euros
à la couverture énergétique de notre pays,
in order to help develop
car
energy
nous
in our
savons
country.
que ce que nous avons comme ambition
And we have a lot of ambitious
pour
projects
la réalisation des plus-values
to
en
add
termes
value
agricoles,
to
dans le
our
domaine
industries and
agricole,
the
est impossible
agricultural industry.
si le
This
disponible
would be
énergétique
impossible if we
reste
didn't
au niveau
have
où il est
a
aujourd'hui.
energy
Et là,
sector that was
nous sommes en train de
improved,
faire des
because if it
progrès.
stays at the state that it
Nous
is
sommes
today, we will
aujourd'hui
not be able
à
to develop other
350 mégawatts
sectors.
disponibles
Right now,
énergétiques.
we have
Et notre besoin,
350
c'est chiffre 700 mégawatts.
megawatts available of
Et j'avais dit
electricity,
un peu rapidement
and
que
we are hoping to
une
increase this to
centrale
700 million megawatts.
Albatros était en voie d'être inaugurée. Il semble que là, je suis allé
People
un
know
peu
that
vite.
I have
Je
been
crois que
working
on
on
va
trying to
juste
advance
poser
these
la
projects very
pierre,
rapidly.
mais c'est vous
But
dire que
this
cela nous
all
tient
to say
beaucoup à cœur
that
et nous
these are
allons
issues that we take very
élargir ce pacte-là
seriously,
dans les années à venir.
and we are
Nous avions promis
sure that we will be making
200
continued
000
progress in the
emplois.
future. We are also trying to
Nous arrivons à le
increase
faire. Nous avons aujourd'hui
employment and to provide
222
200,000 new
350
jobs.
emplois réalisés.
And we have also
Cela
created
également
222,000 new
assez
jobs.
Prometteur pour l'avenir.
And so this is very promising for the
Donc nous
future.
sommes aujourd'hui premier producteur de coton au sud du
So
Sahara.
we are also the leading
Malgré le
producer
contexte de
of
crise que nous
cotton
traversons,
in the Sahel region.
malgré les difficultés économiques qui sont nôtres.
Despite our economic challenges,
producteur
despite the other
de
security
coton au sud du
challenges,
Sahara.
we are still
Mais
the leading
il y a un
producer
mais.
of cotton. However,
Cela aurait été une vraie aubaine
it would have
si
been
nous pouvions
it would have
transformer
been
le coton
even
malien
better
sur
if
place.
we were able to
Hélas,
process
nous ne
cotton in our
transformons aujourd'hui
country.
que 2% de ce coton malien.
Unfortunately, right now we
Donc,
only
il y a
are able
un gap
to
énorme.
process 2%
Il y a une
of the
moindre
cotton we
variation à ce
produce.
niveau-là
So there's
que
a
nous
lot
allons
of room
combler
for added
par les
value
partenariats
in this
et que
industry, and
nous
we
allons
are
également soumettre à
looking
nos
for
amis,
partners
et bientôt
amongst our
d'ailleurs
friends,
avec,
and
la US Chamber of Commerce.
we will be working with partners such as the U.S. Chamber of Commerce and
Nous
seeking other
serons le premier
partnerships as
cheptel
well. We are also the leading, have the leading livestock
de la zone
industry
UEMOA.
in the WEMU region.
Nous sommes le troisième producteur d'or.
We are the third leading
après
producer of gold in
l'Afrique du
Africa
Sud et le
after
Ghana.
South Africa and Ghana.
Nous avons, je l'ai dit encore une
And
fois,
as I
un taux de
said
croissance
earlier, we have an annual
5%,
growth rate of
que
5%,
j'estime encore insuffisant,
which I still
et
feel is
que
not sufficient.
le ministre des Finances
And
et
the
de
Ministry
l'Économie
of Finance and
promet de
Economy
booster dans les temps à venir.
has
le
promised to
ministre,
continue working on this and to increase it in the coming months.
Soutenez fortement pour
So
cela.
we're really hoping that he'll be able to do
Voilà,
that,
chers
and we'll
amis,
support him in his
tableau que je voulais
efforts.
vous brosser.
So this is the
Et en
overall
vous
picture
remerciant
I
encore
wanted
une
to
fois,
give you of Mali, and again, I would
sincèrement,
like to
merci.
sincerely
Merci
thank
pour
you.
l'intérêt que vous
Thank
avez
you
pour le
for all the
Mali,
interest that you have
la
shown in
considération
Mali.
que nous votre présence massive
Thank you
et de
for this
qualité.
opportunity
Et
to
vous
speak
dire
to you
également
and for
que c'est
coming
avec
out in
plaisir
such large numbers.
que
It's
nous
been a
tâcherons
pleasure to be able
répondre à vos
to
préoccupations
share our experiences
le
with
cours
you
de ce
and
débat-là.
to talk
C'est
about
entre vous et nous.
these common issues we have.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much.
Ok. Où suis-je?
Well, Mr. President, thank you
Monsieur le
so much for
Président,
joining
je
us
vous
today.
remercie infiniment de
We are deeply honored
vous joindre à nous
that
aujourd'hui.
you
Nous
would
sommes
be,
profondément honorés
you would find the time in an
que vous
incredibly
ayez
busy
trouvé
schedule to
le
join us
temps, compte tenu de votre
at the
emploi du temps
Brookings
extrêmement
Institution.
occupé, pour venir à Brookings.
How do you hear me, sir?
Est-ce que vous m'entendez?
I'm trying.
Est-ce que vous
Find me
m'entendez?
someone 13 years old, quickly.
M'entendez-vous?
Could we get someone up here?
M'entendez-vous? Ça va, vous m'entendez?
Amadou.
Test.
Thank you.
Vous m'entendez?
Oui.
Oui, ça y est, le son passe.
Yes, I can
Now
hear you.
everything's okay.
Thank you. Mr.
Everything is okay now.
Ça va.
Good. Very good.
OK.
Well, we're deeply honored that you could
Nous
find
sommes
the time
profondément honorés que vous ayez
incredibly busy
trouvé
schedule
le
to join
temps
us
dans votre
here
emploi
at
du temps
Brookings today.
tellement occupé de venir ici à
We
Brookings
know
aujourd'hui.
how
Nous
important your time
savons
is,
combien votre temps est
and it would be
important
difficult to overstate
et il
how
serait difficile
honored and privileged we feel that you would find the time to be with us. And let me also welcome the remainder of your delegation who is traveling with you, but also to welcome the excellencies and diplomats and scholars for whom Africa is such an important subject. We are honored to have an important world leader here today, but we're also deeply grateful, Mr. President, for the vital African voice that you bring to this institution today to help us to understand how you see the challenges that you face every day in Mali, but also the challenges of Africa. But very importantly, you have given us a glimpse of your vision for how you will lead Mali into the future. Not just as a leader of Mali, but a leader in Africa, and as Mali sets the example in the way in the days ahead. So we're really grateful for your taking the time to be with us today. And sir, we have several questions for you. And as our senior fellow, Ibrahim Koulibaly, said at the beginning of the introduction, ladies and gentlemen, if you have a question, we ask you to write it on a card. We will collect these, and they'll be delivered to me in a few minutes. And we'll have about 20 minutes at the end, sir, to offer you the opportunity to respond. But if I may, I'd like to begin by asking you, Mr. President, if you could discuss the state of security in the Sahel since the 2015 Algiers Peace Accord. And in addition, what priority actions do you believe can be taken to improve collaboration at the local level, at the national level, regionally, and with international partners?
Merci.
Thank you, General. Thank you very much. Alan, you're, as you know, a coalition. No matter what its ambition is, its desires are, it is only worthwhile if all of the different elements that make up the coalition are able to contribute to the coalition or play their role. So that's why, General Allen, I feel that that my first priority as a Malian was to improve the strength of our armed forces when I took office. And we have a country that is very large, 1,240,000 square kilometers, and it's impossible to reach some areas without helicopters in some areas of Mali. So as you can understand, my first priority was to train the Malian army. Today, for the first time in about 10 years, we have seen a strong military on September 22nd, just a week ago, which was the occasion to organize a gathering where we showed our people what we have done and how much we have been able to accomplish in the 5 years of my term. Now, of course, there's still much work to be done. We have not done everything. We have 11 airplanes in the Malian budget. And what is important for us and for the Minister of Finance is that we are trying to tackle all the issues that we have had with managing public finances. And thanks to our efforts to clean up public finances, we've been able to purchase these 11 aircraft, cargo planes, helicopters. And when I get back to my country, we will be working on some of the areas that are still inaccessible except by air, because we need to be able to have access to all these areas. Now, we have also been assisted by the international community, supported by the European Union through the European Union training missions that I'm sure you're familiar with, the UTEM missions, and also through the CAP, because there's also a security aspect in this security initiative. So UCAP has also been working with us to help train our police officers and our gendarmerie. And this is all done within the context also of fighting against terrorism, because often the terrorists are hiding amongst the population. This is a very classic problem where it's no longer a symmetrical, it's an asymmetric fight along the borders, and I'm sure you're well aware of this as much as I know it as well as I do. So that was the first priority. And this, I've been very happy to see the progress made by the G-5 Sahel with my colleagues. And we are working together. Of course, it's good to say, yes, let's work together, but what is it we want to accomplish? And as they said in Potsdam, famously, Potsdam, what is it we want to accomplish? This is, as our Joint Chiefs of Staff knows well, we are focusing on how we're able to strengthen our security forces, and we're doing this through an organized approach to our methods. We've understood that we need to have more guidelines and military training and forming, and over 5 years we will have a program to be able to set aside the necessary resources to equip and train our army. So this is a 5-year plan, and this has enabled us to make the progress that we have made and to reach the level that we are at today. And we have Malians who have been trained as professional soldiers. And when you look at, for example, the town hall in Gao and the soldiers that are there, you will see a Malian soldier next to a French one. And when I saw that, it brought tears to my eyes for the first time. The French soldier was armed, was well-equipped with everything he needed. But the Malian soldier did not have anything, did not have the necessary equipment. He was barely wearing sandals. He didn't have boots. He had an extremely outdated rifle. And that brought tears to my eyes, General Allen. And I said to myself on that day that this is something that I will not have accomplished anything if I'm not able to be able to improve our army and our defense. So this is something that I've been working on very strongly with the G5 Sahel coalition. So that is in part answer to your question. We need to be working with our partners at the regional level, but also our joint force needs additional support. If the joint forces does not have the assurance of sustainable financing, sustainable regular funding sources, we will not be able to deploy soldiers to the field and to have the proper logistics and equipment if we don't have these resources. After 2 days, if they don't have the resources, they'll either be suffering from hunger or won't have the necessary equipment. So we're asking the international community to support us in this. Our budget is 423 million euros. this to defend, and this is not an excessive budget to defend this region, and yet we still have funding shortages, a funding gap. So this is why the United Nations is supporting us, and we have been able to convince them that this initiative should be put on the UN agenda. And we are working to make sure that this is not only a multilateral effort, but also a bilateral effort, such as the support from the United States. So also we are very appreciative of the U.S. support and the Flintlock exercises, and this has really helped us to achieve a much higher level. So this is something that we are continuing to promote, and this is something we want you to help us do. You can't do it in our place. This is something we have to do on our own, but we need support. And we are here at this level, and we have a lot of. We're really concerned about making sure that we can have this security force in order to protect the dignity of our people, because they are a people who have a lot of dignity, and they are citizens of the world as well. We're actors of the world, and part of this century. So this is what I would answer.
We know that these challenges seem immense, and you've had a very busy week in conjunction with the UN General Assembly and the meetings that have occurred on the periphery and in the margins of the UN General Assembly. Were you satisfied, sir, that the meetings at the General Assembly sufficiently addressed the fragility of the Sahel region and the gap which exists between security and humanitarian assistance and development? Is that agency, is the UN fully invested in understanding that problem and beginning to set the conditions to begin to address it?
General Allen, I don't know exactly how to answer that, especially when we talk about the UN mission, for example, the multinational UN mission, MINUSMA, which has been set up in Mali, but it's suffered a lot of human loss in human life and also a lot of material loss. And I'm sure that we are aware, we have the memory of all those who have been lost in the Sahel. And there are approximately 30 different nationalities that are part of this mission. So MINUSMA has had a very strong presence, but is continuing to be there, and it's a very strong presence. But the United Nations and the world, and what I say to my fellow countrymen is that we need to be careful. Because there was a time when everybody is looking at you, the whole world is looking at you, but things are changing so quickly that the situation could change abruptly from one day to another. And you must be careful if you lose your momentum, because we have to continue fighting this fight. For us, it is important that the peace agreement, peace and reconciliation agreement, that we have laboriously worked on to try to establish with all the different Malian partners that we negotiated in Algiers, that this is something that comes to fruition, and this is something that we hold to, that we attach a lot of importance to. This agreement must be fully implemented, and it is an urgent matter. We understand that we cannot simply be, that we are a little bit impatient, but we also realize that in Mali, at the moment of the International Conference on Resource Mobilization for the OECD in Paris, we were promised funding, which still has yet to come, and that was in 2015. And we're still waiting to receive these funds. General Allen, in March of 2018, We also had another meeting in Brussels, and during this meeting, many commitments were made. But again, we're still looking to the heavens to see if the skies to see if the planes are going to fly over and drop these funds on us. So it's a problem. There's a lot of impatience, but yet the reality is that on the ground, the resources are still lacking to implement this agreement. And it would be a very stupid move to not do everything we could to promote this agreement. And there's really no reason to drag our feet on this. If we're doing this, if this is the case, it's because we're still waiting to have certain commitments fulfilled. And if all these commitments were fulfilled and the promises were fulfilled, then I would say, General Allen, that the dividends of peace, if the people were able to support the peace process, then I think this would bring about a huge change. And we would see a complete change between the post-situation and the pre-situation and the post-situation. And in this situation, right now, we have to see what the dividends of peace are, what the added value is of peace. And these dividends are that social needs are met, that roads are built, that airports are constructed, hospitals are built, and that there are centers of information and education. And this is all things that we have planned for, that we have promised our people, and yet there's still a singular issue, a singular problem. We have to have solidarity. We have to have funding. We can't just live off promises. We have plans we need to manage, and yet somewhere along the way, we have to also ensure that this peace is firmly rooted. As you know, General, this is in this fight against terrorism. This is not something that can be done simply by one country. That this is not a gift.
Mr. President, I think you have accurately identified that we must have in Mali and in the 5 states the kind of security platform through developed security forces, through relationships between the security forces and the international community, to create the platform upon which credible government can emerge and economic opportunity can emerge. And you've given us that vision, and I think that sounds exactly right in terms of the roadmap that you've set for both your people and the region. As you have worked so hard to adopt democracy and to strengthen democratic institutions, how do you reconcile at this moment a strong capacity for the government to be accountable, but also at the same time the decentralization of governance in order to accomplish your objectives?
General Allen, I'm strongly convinced, and I have been for some time, that decentralization is the way forward. And we were among some of the first in Africa to initiate a process of decentralization under President John R in 1992. Today, we are continuing to promote this effort, and we are doing what we can to make sure that decentralization is becoming a greater reality, and that there is true and effective transfer of power, of governance, from the central to a more decentralized situation. And this is all something that was included in the Peace and Reconciliation Agreement for Mali. And today, in the run-up to 2018, 30% of our resources are to be transferred, and I hope that the Minister of Finance is paying attention to this, but we have been a little bit delayed in some of this in terms of the institutional reforms. There are some reforms that we have not been able to implement until we've been able to reform our Constitution. General, when we began this process, it was difficult. As you know, constitutional reform is something that strikes fear in the hearts of people in Africa. When you say we're going to reform or modify the Constitution, they say, oh, they want to just make sure he's a president for life, but that's not the case. But quite simply, the peace agreement for Mali obliges us to implement a constitutional reform, because throughout the Malian crisis, we noticed one thing, is that the traditional leaders, traditional chiefs, opinion leaders, and community leaders have real influence. And so when there's a crisis, people turn to them. We seek them out. And but sometimes once the crisis is over, we forget them. So we wanted to see how we could integrate them and include them into the institutional system, how we could, for example, create a Senate. We can't create a Senate if we don't include everybody in Mali. And also, General, there's something also that I personally am very attached to, and that is the fight against corruption. We talk a lot about it, especially in Africa. We talk about Africa having a corruption problem. But in Africa, we also have limited resources. So these types of problems, corruption, costs a lot to our societies. And in working to fight corruption and illegal enrichment through corruption, we have adopted a very instrumental legal instrument, the Court of Accounts. And all the countries of the Wemu region have this type of a Court of Accounts. And every time I try to explain to the other heads of state that these courts have to be put into place, we realize that it's not always an easy undertaking. But this is a reform that has to be done. We cannot delay it. We cannot defer it. And there has been a lot of misinformation about this process, perhaps, but it's a complicated process. And the reform of the Constitution has had a few delays, but it is indispensable. It's something we absolutely must do. In order to make this a reality in terms of our governance, people need to have the feeling that they have a say in their destiny, that they have a say in the decisions that are being made that affect their daily lives. And that is also an essential, vital issue that we are trying to promote.
Let me extend this question a bit, and then we'll go to questions from the audience, if I may, sir.
Pardon. Un écouteur rebelle. C'est bon.
We just mentioned a moment ago, Mr. President, the inherent relationship between security, governance, and economic development. And you've just given us insights into what steps you are taking to deal both with creating accountability in government, but also to deal specifically with the issue of corruption. And as I think we all know here, corruption is one of the most corrosive effects on democracy and young democracies. So I certainly applaud, and I think we would all here applaud the steps that you're taking, both to build and to strengthen institutions of democracy, to hold those accountable who need to be held accountable, but also to directly attack institutions of corruption. If we have a good security platform, and if we have the capacity to govern, that sets the conditions then for economic development. Mr. President, how do you see the creation of opportunity to bring the private sector along, and also to invite foreign investment in Mali, to create that strengthened economic component of your governance that can enhance your stability even more and enhance your capacity for development even more?
Thank you, General Allen, for that question. And I would say that our country, like all other countries in developing countries, especially in Africa, needs support. We need investment in all areas, and we need a lot of investment. But the climate for investment has to be, first of all, one of security and stability. And I've been explaining some of the efforts that we've been undertaking to ensure that our region is a livable region, a secure region, and that in Mali we are no longer in the red, but we have a very good climate for investment. We've been working on reforming our code of investment so that it is and it already is a very favorable law, but we're still working on it. And in doing business, I think we're pretty well rated in West Africa on the Doing Business Index. And I think that investors are attracted by what we've been doing in terms of economics, the progress we've made, that our country has been improving our economy with our growth rate, that in this context, our country is one of the leading producers in the Sahel region. Producing 9 million tons, 62%. And we're also, as I said, the leading producer of cotton. And this is one of the best fibers in the world. So there's a huge potential for textile development in Mali. And I would also say that we also have a lot of room for added value. As I said, leading producer of cotton in Africa, but we can add value if we can process it locally, if we have the facilities, the infrastructure to process it locally, which would also create more jobs for our young people. And it would also increase revenues for our producers, as well as creating jobs for our young people, and also enable us to sell raw cotton on the world market, but also process it locally. I think today that we're in a position where, as I said, we are the third leading producer of gold in the world, and we have only just started beginning to refine the gold. And the Malian producers have not been able to achieve their potential. We haven't reached our potential for production. It's still not sufficient. And General Allen, I would say that this is not something that's going to happen miraculously. This is something that's because of the policies we've been implementing. We decided, for example, that during the Mobutu summit in Africa, we decided that every African country would pay 10% of its annual budget into this fund for development in Africa. And with my government, we have been focusing on the economic sector, and we've decided not to allocate 10%, but 15%. Also, we have been subsidizing our agricultural industry, not only to make sure that it is more mechanized, because in the 21st century, our countries are still quite behind in terms of our mechanization, and this has been a huge drawback for us and a stumbling block to our production. So we've been setting up mechanisms to promote a program, a tractor program that we're subsidizing, and at least 1,300 new tractors have been injected into this circuit. So this has had a huge impact, and some of the results that I have described earlier are the fruits of these policies. So our farmers are seeing that we have confidence in them. And because of these subsidies, they are able to equip themselves with modern means of production. So these efforts are all areas of hope for us for the future. We have 1 million hectares of farmable land thanks to irrigation from the Nile River. And we also have a system that dates back to 1968. It was a French agronomist who helped develop this irrigation system, and this helped us to develop 1 million hectares of land. But out of this land that's been developed, I think that we still have quite a bit. We still have 130,000 million hectares. And so we have a huge potential. You can see the great potential. So there's a lot of hope. There's work to be done, efforts to be made. And I think that still in the field of agriculture, there's a lot of potential there, but also in the industrial sector. Products that today are helping to feed major industries, but our industries need electricity. We need energy, and so it's also an imperative for us, and I'm saying this also for the ministers in the room, that we need to have more partners to develop our energy sector in Mali, so that we are able to have small producers and large producers who can provide jobs and who can continue to promote growth in our country. So again, I think there's hope. But also another issue that we can't overlook is the legal framework. If people are to invest in our country, they have to feel assured. They have to have the assurance that we have a sound legal framework that will be favorable to investment, and that their rights will be respected. And we are also focusing our efforts on our legal instruments. This is something that's an imperative, the legal framework, a regulatory framework, and this has all been put in place to help promote investments.
That's critical. President, obviously transparency, judicial accountability, the capacity for your system to arbitrate for your foreign partners will be a strong incentive for them to feel comfortable with the kinds of foreign direct investment that can truly be of assistance to your economic development. And if I may ask, Mr. President, your principal foreign partners on your infrastructure and your energy, can you talk to us a bit about who those partners are and how they're helping?
Well, General, Mali is a country that is open to international partners. We don't give priority to one partner over another. We're not exclusive. We're open to any type of partnership in the sense that as long as it's going to be a win-win situation for both parties. We're very open to working with anybody. We don't really play favorites, and so we also want all countries in the world to trust us, and those who have dared to come to Mali, despite the context that I described, despite the problems, these partners have not left us. Those who have dared to come have still stayed with us, such as the United States. They've stood with us. Unfortunately, they're coming in fewer numbers right now, but we still have a lot of solid partners.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, you heard it from the President. Mali is open for business.
Totally.
Mr. President, these questions are from your friends on the floor. This is an important question. Given the demographic nature of your population, the youth, and the expanding youth within your population, what some call the youth bulge, are there specific programs that you envisage or that you're undertaking to work the basic education and the basic skills necessary for your young and youthful population to be credible contributors to the future of Mali? Often we see a flight of talent from countries where they have a sense that they have no future, either with the government or with the economy. How do you see taking advantage of this young population and setting them up for success, not just for themselves, but for your country?
Well, General, this is a very vital question. In our countries, the demographic bulge is something that sometimes is seen as something that's a problem where we don't have hope. When you look at the economic problems and you look at the demographics, it sometimes seems pessimistic. But these problems are also complicated by the fact that when you look at also religious considerations and that interfere. And you see that sometimes there are taboos or different issues that come into play. But in a country like Mali today, these issues are very much on the agenda. And we are open to working with everybody, working on religious issues, and even working on family planning. We're very open to this because we feel that the head of a family has a sacred duty to provide for his or her family as much as possible, and to provide a life of dignity for everybody who is dependent on him. So it is clear that a family that is perhaps maybe too large and they can't provide for them, that this is a problem, especially if the resources are limited. So we have also been trying to work on ensuring that our human resources are more qualified, better trained, and even where we don't necessarily have the material resources or where they're lacking, we are still able today to be one of the leading countries in terms of improving the quality of our human resources. So we are, we really would like to see that we feel that any country that isn't really focusing on improving the quality of their human resources is not a country that's going to be able to keep up tomorrow, because the youth are going to be they have to be qualified. They have to have the skills and the job training. As I'm sure you know, we have to be able to have human resources that can, we can't necessarily just hold their hands. We have to be able to train them to then take over themselves after. It's not just a matter of business or training, but we are interdependent. We can't just stand alone. We're interdependent, and in this world of interdependence, everything has to be based on quality, and quality comes through education. This is why, for about the past 10 years, we have been putting into place a program to develop our educational system. We call it the ODEC program. And we are progressively, gradually improving the quality of our educational resources to improve our human resources, because of the different crises we've had over the past few years, we have seen a drop in this level, and we are trying to support them and to promote the quality of our human resources. We're also very concerned, despite despite some of these issues that we're facing, we also have to look at basic research, and especially in the field of agriculture, for example. Mali has a fair amount of experience and has a pretty good reputation in agricultural research, especially in our sub-region. We have a center of excellence, and it's a source of pride for us. So for us, school and education is a whole part of this effort to manage our funds and to manage our human resources, to manage the migration of people. And we often don't have the means to deal with all the migration that we're facing. And so with these resources, we're trying to focus more on the growing numbers of young people rather, who want to go to school and who want to improve their lives. And that's a major point of focus. As a teacher, we know the value of education and culture. And this is a very, very big priority for me. We have a lot of needs in this area, a lot of urgent needs, but we have not been able to, we have still much work to do.
The challenge, Mr. President, is as you equip the youth with the education that they need, convincing those young women and men that their future is tied irrevocably to the future of Mali is the challenge that you face as the leader of your country. Because often in many countries like this, once educated, the youth leave. Or if unable to be educated, they are recruited by the extremists, and that, of course, then is a strike, a blow against stability. So the education in a country like Mali is really central to your strategic future. And it's great to hear that that is a major priority for you. But stability in the entire region is also something that we've heard from you today is important to you. And to what extent, Mr. President, does the stability of Libya impact the stability of Mali?
General Allen, I have to say that we're sort of like we're collateral victims of the damage from Libya. It's not just the Libyans who suffered. The Libyan crisis made the southern part of Libya a huge market for weapons trafficking, arms trafficking. And these arms are flowing into various directions. They're flowing into Chad, Niger, and into Mali. And these are weapons. These are weapons that we have to deal with. We've seen so much. We've seen so many problems because we've been such a victim of this. That these weapons are sophisticated weapons, and they're circulating in our countries very freely. They're being openly sold on the market just like other products. And we also have to fight the trafficking of small arms in the region. We're very concerned. And I was saying it just yesterday, General, or the day before yesterday, when we had the high-level meeting at the United Nations for the Sahel that we had the honor of attending. And this is something that has now become a regular activity as part of the General Assembly meetings. But Libya is a problem. And as long as the situation in Libya has not been dealt with and hasn't been stabilized, then I can assure you that our efforts to promote peace are doomed to failure. And it pains me to say that. It's a very serious thing to say. But as long as we still have these factions of Libyan combatants, as long as we still have Libyan warlords, we will not have peace in the south. And we also have a rather unique and somewhat unfair criminal system, something that is unheard of in the 21st century, where there's still slavery. Our young people are sometimes being taken as slaves into the northern part of the country. They're taken to the desert, and sometimes they are lured to the northern part in the hopes of being taken to across the Mediterranean, but they are taken as slaves. And so there's been this huge slave trade that's been going on. And these people, in recent documents, recent reports, we've seen this scandalous problem with some of our young people being taken slaves into Libya. So this has become intolerable for humanity, for the human condition, and today this is not tolerable for the human state at the level of development where we are today. We should no longer see this. Libya has become a center of absolute destabilization, and everybody's aware of this. And we are victims of the collateral damage from Libya. And we would like everything to be done by the international community, by the UN, to ensure that Libya can finally be stabilized so that there is a state restored to Libya. There's not a state today.
Insights, and Brookings is looking very hard right now at the Libya situation and what potential policy outcomes might be recommended. your voice is very important in that process. And related to that, Mr. President, and this will be the last question that we'll ask you this afternoon, how do you see over the long term the continued French military presence in Mali? And whether you see at some point perhaps the G5 joint force taking over the French presence, or do you see an international military presence there for some period of time?
General Allen, no foreign military force has really a mission or a mandate to stay there forever, to stay in a foreign country forever. The context and the conditions dictate that there has to be an evolution on the ground. When the Sahel operation was conducted in Mali in 2013, this was something that we were very happy to see. It was wonderful because when the government failed, when the state failed, when there was no longer a state, and we saw all the consequences related to that, the Malian state was a failed state at that time. And when this occurred, a partner came in to save us with the foreign forces that were sent. And this was a plan that was set up to help us. But following this, the nature of the mission has evolved. When it became clear that it was a situation of virulent terrorism, that there were religious extremists, and that there were many issues that we had to face, then the force was not deployed just to Mali, but to the entire Sahel region, from Chad to Mali. And the Boubacar force has been working with many countries such as the United States and other friends, and they have been very successful in Mali, but it's not necessarily a traditional operation, a classic operation in terms of sending troops and battalions, but they have been setting up units, dispersed units that intervene periodically and that have been a formidable source of support for us. And I would also like to pay tribute to the memory of those who have fallen in the context of this mission. Recently, we had the case of a soldier who was killed because of an IED. And this was an IED that was built out of fertilizer and various materials, and that was easily made by somebody. And that's why we want to make sure that we're trying to work to ensure that fertilizers that are imported in our country are brought in liquid form, so they cannot be used to build bombs. And in fact, just recently, 7 soldiers were blown up when their vehicle drove over an IED. So, General Allen, I think that the presence of this mission, the French operation, and other forces, other allied forces, is something that is helping us to deal with the terrorist threat. Where it's evolving, and it will be evolving as we fight this terrorist threat. But I don't think that it's something that's going to be a permanent mission, because everybody is focused on the same concern. We're all concerned about about ensuring that we can live in peace and restore security, because that's all we ask, is to live in peace and security and in dignity.
I want to thank you sincerely for honoring us today with your presence. You've given us important insights into the challenges that you face every day as the President of Mali, but also important insights into the challenges that many African states face today. I want to assure you that the Africa Growth Initiative at Brookings will continue to be seized in studying these issues, and offering hopeful policy options in the future. We value our partnership with you in this regard, and under Ibrahim Koulibaly, we value his leadership, and we look forward to continuing to work with you in the future so that Brookings can be a factor in your continued growth as a nation and your stability. And we're very honored that you could join us this afternoon. And ladies and gentlemen, please join me in thanking the President of Mali. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Say how pleased I am to see that everybody came here to show their interest in Mali and the Sahel. Thank you very much. That is international solidarity. That is international friendship and support. Thank you very much.